Hello and welcome to the show. This week's FailRace versus the community, we would go racing with an open C-class, and I would finally remember to build an MG. I've been meaning to build this car for various racing. Pretty much every time there has been a class that it could be running, I've completely forgotten about it. But so today I was determined, or for this one I was determined to get an MG and hopefully get an MG working. Our first race was at the Bugatti circuit, and of course the Forza gods had decided that I should be down at the back. But a pretty good start from the MG, jumped me up a few positions. We got through the chicane nicely, stayed out of any sort of trouble. There were a few other MGs around the place as I have to go the long way round at this next corner. I was trying to follow a Nissan, the IDX, up through the field. Now the IDX was all about the handling, was amazingly quick through the corners, but as soon as you got even something vaguely resembling a straight, everything came soaring back past it. My MG actually a pretty well balanced car. It was good through the turns, good acceleration, didn't quite have the top speed, it wasn't ludicrously fast accelerating, but yeah, it was kind of a good overall vehicle as I get a move done. I get past a Clio, get past a Pacer, the Maserati in a little bit of trouble out wide, but once it could get the power down, that would go soaring off down the straight. You can see the struggles of that IDX into straight line speed. The Maserati goes soaring past. I get to the inside, but I can't brake anywhere near as late as the Nissan, so in the end I have to kind of let it go, and sure enough, the Maserati doesn't have too much in the way to fight through the corners, but there's another acceleration zone. I draw back alongside that IDX. It's not going to be enough though. I'm going to have to try to go around the outside, and well, I do not have the grip for that one. I certainly wasn't the only MG in the field. A little bit further up, there was, well, there's three of them actually in this first race. A few people had the same idea as me of actually, finally remembering to build these little British sports cars. This one coming up against one of, well, the big, I think it was the Napalm Nova, in fact, which, quite interestingly, this particular MG had the acceleration to match. Top end, the Nova, well, considerably more powerful. It would have a higher top speed, but the MG being so light meant that their acceleration was remarkably even. The MG better through the corners, around the outside of the Nova through essentially two turns, and that Nova is not a small car, certainly not when you are driving what is a small car in the MG, and the MG keeps even with it all the just towards the end of the straight. That's when the Nova's power will kick in, but the Nova's not going to have the handling to go around the outside at the chicane, and that would be the MG up into a fourth position. The IDX, well, that continued its march through the field, making up huge amounts of time when it came to the corners, and then losing a fair bit of it when it got to the straights. But overall, it was a net gain. It just dives to the outside of the Subaru Brat. Absolutely no problems going all the way around the outside, and it will still be there. It will get a better run off the corner as well, even on a wonky line. Just can't match necessarily the Brat's acceleration. The Subaru tried to fight it through the next corner, and like every time they got to a sort of straight, the Nissan could be in a little bit of trouble. It had to try and make as much ground through the corners to be out of range by the time they got to a straight. Unfortunately for me, I would be in a little bit of a tangle and drop down the order slightly, so it wasn't going to be a greatest of races for my MG. However, further up towards the front, well, the battle for third would be an interesting one. Again, MG this time versus a Skyline. Skyline, acceleration, had the straight line speed, did not have the cornering of the little sports car, but the green vehicle was having a tough time trying to find a way past, and this is the problem you see time and time again. When you've got the car with all of that corner grip, you might even be faster around a lap. However, trying to get past, you end up being compromised so much through some of the slow corners that it can be quite costly. It can be quite difficult to find ways past, because every time you get to a braking zone, the straight line speed, the acceleration vehicle is just too far away. And there was a second IDX in the field. Again, another car very, very good through the corners. Was also picking its way up through the order. The Brat having to try and defend. That's a very long way around the outside, that corner. You don't see very many passes. You see very many passes done there full stop, let alone trying to go all the way around the outside. And the IDX almost gets away with it. Can't quite do it. The Brat is on the limit of the braking performance and just cannot quite pull it up in time through all that. The IDX moving up a position. Now, the Subaru, of course, is going to have that straight line speed as we head down this next section. It's not quite as much overspeed as he would perhaps want heading towards the chicane. He gets his nose to the inside, kind of where you want to be. That Nissan is so good under brakes that there's not too much the pickup truck can do about it. You can just about see my MG starting to recover further back. I would run out of laps to do too much and hang around just around the 10th position mark. At the front, and it was a rather unusual vehicle that would go on to take victory in a fairly straightforward race for the cars. Well, I say straightforward race, they're not the easiest of cars to drive. The Carbon Gear taking victory, a Honda S800 would take second place. Lightweight, immense acceleration would be enough to get these cars to first and second. The Carbon Gears are not easy cars to build, to be even vaguely drivable, let alone to be fast, but it did work very, very well indeed. Third place, that went all the way down to the wire. The blue IDX was up in fifth, and we're starting to catch these cars, ran out of laps to do anything about it. The MG was busy looking for a way past. I mean, this is the MG's best chance. There's a few slow corners here. If you are in position, he's going to have to go around the outside for the final two turns. That car has got a lot more grip than the Skyline. He gets a good run on the outside, but it's no match quite for the Skyline's power as they come across the line. It was a very, very close finish because the start-finish line is fairly close to the exit of the final corner, short further along the Skyline's going to Muller, that MG. So, to the actual photo finish, well, we know from previous Forzas that the game measures where the wheels cross the finish line as the vehicle having finished, not when the nose crosses the finish line and crosses the start of the finish line. I think I'm going to say the Skyline got it, but it is also really very close. The Skyline driver's feet do slightly poke out underneath the floor. There's a hole in the bottom of the Skyline. I mean, it's an old Skyline, but either way, it's very close. I think the Skyline's wheels are ever so fractionally across the line before the MG's, but that's, yeah, one of the closest photo finishes we've had, certainly in a very, very long time. To the podium, Please Don't Eat Me taking victory. Pokecraft in second, with Gliscott holding on to that third place, but only just. Race number 2, and we would head to the Road Atlanta circuit. Believe it or not, I didn't start last. I started in 6th. It's a weird day when I'm starting in 6th. Like, that's the highest I've started on a grid for about 3 weeks in these. It was it's a good day, and I would very quickly make the most of it with my fast starting MG. Further back, well, it was quite busy, as you would expect. There's BMW on the grass, although everybody did a pretty good job through these opening laps. Nobody ended up in the tyre bundle at the top of the hill. The machine that we are following here did a very good job, actually, of carving his way through the field to, it was a fairly long way back. Did not take long for the big muscle car to work its way up towards the, well inside the top 10 by this stage. There were a couple of spinners going down the hill, unfortunately, but on the whole, pretty clean first lap. Alfa Romeo 75 had started down in the lower echelons of the pack. This as one of the cars to watch. Like, we were looking at the stats of the vehicles beforehand, and the Alfa had an awful lot of handling compared to the rest of us, and sure enough, you can see how quick the 75 could get through the corners. While yes, there is a couple of decent sized straights, the speed that could take was remarkable. Now, for me, at the front, while it looked like in the replays I was running away on my own, that was not the case. I was actually having, for the first 4 or 5 laps, I was having a very, very good battle with a BMW 2002 Turbo. However, BMW doesn't show up on the replays, unfortunately. The 2002 would have a controller issue that would put pay to his chances of winning the race, and I think would disconnect after that. So I think because he disconnected, that's why his car didn't turn up in the replays. But yeah, unfortunately, BMW was not around. So while, yeah, in the replays it looks like I'm miles ahead, I'd actually had some company for a lot of it. There was also a donk in this race. There was a Monte Carlo donk that was surprisingly, quite alarmingly quick in many ways. With the BMW disconnecting, this would actually become the battle for third place between a Challenger and a donk. The donk managing to go around the outside at one of the longest corners on the... Like, I was impressed at the speed of the Monte... I was very, very impressed at the speed of the Monte Carlo. Lap time-wise, it couldn't match the likes of my MG. It couldn't match the likes of the machine either, but got itself up into third place and continued to lap pretty damn well. Further back was where most of the action was going on. A couple of Clio V6s were doing battle. This kind of yellow and silver car losing out in the end. You can kind of see the front groups weren't too busy for a lot of the time. These guys back here were very quickly embroiled in fights. The Clio fending off from the vehicles behind up ahead. That's BMW would lead the pack here. A Civic would end up in the barriers. Everybody's trying to avoiding action. The poor Clio gets swamped by absolutely everything. The tyre bundle at the final corner is a dangerous thing. And a number of vehicles, very easy to get caught out slightly by that. But everyone doing a good job of not collecting the stricken car. A Corsa would be involved in troubles early on, but would have enough time to go on a recovery drive. And the Corsa actually had some pretty serious speed around this circuit. Moving up positions against the S2000, now coming up against the BMW. The Honda with a lot of speed down this sort of start-finish straight, but you don't really want to be going 3 wide into turn 1. It's a bit difficult corner to get too wide as the Corsa, gets the move done, runs a little wide on the exit. You've got to be wary someone doesn't go for a cutback on the run up the hill, but the Vauxhall manages to cover all of that off and would keep the position. And now the BMW's in a little bit of trouble from that S2000 as they run down the hill. At the front, for me, pretty straightforward. After the BMW's disconnection, there was not too much trouble. Me and the machine were setting very similar lap times between us. Had we been close together, would probably have been quite interesting. Had the BMW not lagged out, would probably have been quite interesting between all of us. Our lap times were remarkably similar, but having got the lead early on, got that gap built up, able to run away, and then did not really have too much trouble. Yeah, I finally got to the top step of the podium. F1 Kieran in second with EBR Liam T getting the donk onto the podium as well, which is a really rather impressive achievement. For our third and final race as we headed to Laguna, well, my 6th place starting position, well, that was going to be a distant memory, as it was back to the rear of the field for me, having to do some mega commitment. I did have a wheel on the sand, I think, going 4 wide across the start-finish line, and it very much was stuck on the outside for the MG. Now, I was okay with it, in as much as, well, my car had a lot of grip. My car was fine to make its way around the outside of everybody. I couldn't make up too many more places in all of that as we head in towards these next corners. It was, again, a very busy opening lap, with the exception of the machine getting a bit of a nudge off at turn 1. Again, another very clean start to the race. You can see how busy it is. It's just, where do you go? When you're in a little sports car, you've got a Mustang, you've got an Odyssey, you've got a big Mercedes Grosser, there's an Audi Q7 in all of that. Where do you go with your little sports car? It's just, there was no room. Even with all of the speed in my vehicle, there was very little in the way of space to be putting the car up on the outside of the Odyssey at the top of the hill. Now, I've said many times before, that is a dodgy corner going too wide. You really don't want to get hung out to dry on the outside. We do give each other enough space. I get away with it. I'll then cut back to the inside for the run up towards the corkscrew, hoping I could finally outbrake the big people carrier as we all jump down that section. I think the Q7 tangled with an MG at the bottom, sending the MG around the Q7 waiting up. That would get one of the big cars out of the way, for me at least. There was some unusual vehicle choices going on in here, although some were far quicker than you would ever expect them to be. A G-Wagon had actually started right at the very front of the field. And a Lumicraft buggy, because why not? It's open C-Class, why not bring a buggy? Was actually pretty capable. This thing was not slow around this circuit whatsoever. Got to the inside of a 3 wide with a Chevelle and a G-Wagon managing to make that pass stick. I guess the advantage with the buggy is if you do end up with a wheel on the sand, it doesn't matter too much. It's supposed to deal with that kind of thing. Still trying to go around the outside of the Chevelle. Can't quite make it stick at that particular point on the circuit. I mean, that's 2 quarters around the outside. The Lumicraft just eventually running out of road, but would stay in the fight. At the front, and it was all action as well. The Mazda RX-7 led the way from a Maserati. BMW and IDX were fighting in all of this. The IDX getting to the inside, up to 3rd place and carrying so much speed through that final corner, nearly getting the Maserati as well. and then we come to a straight. And then everything goes away from that Nissan. The Maserati goes soaring off into the distance. The BMW would pass with no problems whatsoever. Of course, all of that gap gets eradicated as soon as we get into the turns, but the IDX loses time being stuck through here, whereas the straight line speed, or the faster straight line speed cars, don't lose time going past the Nissan when it comes to that straight line. You can see how quick that IDX is catching, and you know, it's only going to be a matter of time. The BMW has to go very, very defensive through all these corners. The Maserati you can watch struggling its way through the turns as well. The BMW has to go ultra defensive, because the Nissan is so very fast. It looks at having a dive, isn't quite close enough through there. It's only a matter of time, though. Further back, I was in an amazing battle. However, I couldn't really see much of the racetrack. I was up against a G-Wagon, the Grosser. The machine had recovered pretty well, and then there was me in a little British sports car trying not to get murdered by the giant vehicles. I, much like the Nissan, was suffering similar problems. I was immensely fast around this circuit. It really, really suited the MG. The problem was I couldn't use any of my corner speed because I had a G-Wagon and a Grosser and a massive muscle car alongside in front of me and generally getting in the way. And as soon as we got to a straight, they were quicker than me. The MG wasn't bad accelerating whatsoever, but they were just faster than I was. I have to go around the outside of a muscle car, and then even if I got it around there, and then got boxed in by two massive Mercedes, still the AMC is looking to the outside. I have a big dive up the inside in the hopes of getting past at least one of the Mercedes. Can't quite do it. I've got to come from a long way back. I've got the grip, I've got the brakes to get alongside, but I haven't got the acceleration. Now we're going to go 3 wide at the top of the hill. I eventually kind of back out of that one as best I can. Now, as I said, 2 wide at the top of that hill is a real sketchy thing to do. 3 wide when you've got 2 not small vehicles there was perhaps one of the scariest things I have done. We did get away with it, though. We all gave each other enough space. I ended up losing out in all of that, but I couldn't regather myself. You know, a couple of corners. I had a bit of a sideways moment through the corkscrew, which I didn't really want, but a couple of corners and the MG will be right back on the tail of this group. I was very impressed with the car, but I'm right back on the tail of this group that I wasn't able to pass before, and now I'm looking again. Can I find a way past? Probably not. The final turn, I've got more than enough grip to go around the outside of the machine. I mean, the more we fought, we brought in the Hyundai, there's a Porsche, the Odyssey was catching up as we continued to fight. I mean, this group was mad. The machine eventually just having the straight line speed to get away from the 2 Mercedes. I was eventually ran out of patience at getting past the 2 Mercedes. As they fought, the Grosser on the outside, the G-Wagon was a little bit sort of stuck with nowhere to go. I just threw the MG up the inside knowing I'd have the grip to get away with this one. The Grosser having to eventually lift out of that one, not wanting to be stuck on the outside of a 3 wide through a fast corner. Now it was me versus the G-Wagon. I was going to have to do things the tough way for this. It was going to be around the outside of one corner. You can see how much I was on the limit of what grip I had in that MG. Up towards the top of the hill, the G-Wagon's got the acceleration to try and force the case 2 wide. I've got the grip to make it work on the outside there. I think this race I've spent the most time side by side through that corner as I have in any other race. The machine's buggered off while we're busy fighting like this. Still going to have to go around the outside. The G-Wagon just hasn't got the brakes, though, in the end. To fight it, I run very, very deep in the corkscrew to make sure that I have got the move completed. In all of that, the Grosser's actually made the most of the opportunity as well, as I got to prise the door open. The Grosser would fly past as well, and we would finally be released from the G-Wagon. And actually, both of our cars were very quick. Both mine and the Grosser were very quick at running in clean air. Further back towards the front, the top group would still remain close. The Maserati eventually getting dropped down to a 3rd place, although the leader, unfortunately, for the RX-7 would disconnect in all of that. That promoted the Maserati back to 2nd, so this would become now a top 3. It is a bit unfortunate for the RX-7. It would be interesting to see whether the IDX could have done much about chasing that car down, but yeah, unfortunately, internet will be internet. The BMW spots an opportunity. Maserati was a little bit slow across the inside of a corner, a little bit of a wiggle, just lost the momentum coming up that hill. The BMW sweeps around the outside, a very, very good pass from the BMW. Maserati with a big bit of oversteer through the mid-corner, just couldn't quite hold on to the 2nd place. The BMW would move up, while the IDX, having got to the front, running in clean air, not having anybody slowing him down, was going to run away a little bit. Further back, the Illumicraft. I mean, this was kind of the battle for what was now 4th, 5th and 6th, the Illumicraft was putting in a damn good showing in all of this, as the Illumicraft fought with the Chevelle and another one of the IDX. That's around the outside of the show. Okay, of course, the Chevelle is not exactly the greatest handling vehicle in existence. You know, we're not expecting it to be the most amazing, but still, that's an off-road racing buggy going around the outside, and it was keeping pace with the IDX. The machine, and once my MG had been released, we were slightly faster and we were gradually catching this group, but we're going to run out of laps. All of us had spent far too long being stuck behind a G-Wagon further back. The Chevelle had a very, very big dive, a very well-judged dive from a long way back to draw alongside that Illumicraft. It's not quite going to be able to complete it, though, heading towards the next turn. The Chevelle doesn't have the grip to make that one stick around the outside, and the Illumicraft would keep its position. At the front, once released from traffic, the IDX was able to pull a little bit of a gap to the BMW and the Maserati. I would love to have seen what my MG could have done. Lap time-wise, after I'd got into some clear air, my MG was taking very, very similar lap times to the IDX. It would have been very interesting to see what it could have done had I had the opportunity to race against it, but yeah, I was stuck in traffic, and the Nissan for the final few laps was able to run a little bit clear. It is also a big shame, of course, to the RX-7 that was leading the race. You know, we've had a few times where cars end up disconnecting out of the lead. Would have been interesting to see if the RX-7 could have fended off the Nissan. The G-Wagon, well, once I'd got past, opened the floodgates a little bit, it fell back to a 10th place, but was desperately trying to cling on to a top 10. I mean, the G-Wagon is one of the most useless cars in C-Class. However, it was doing a surprising job. And I mean, at the end of the day, it did actually cause a lot of issues for both me and the Mercedes Rosa, and to an extent the machine as well. It went remarkably well for considering what a dopey car that it actually is. On the final lap, though, it was really having now to try and defend from the Odyssey. A Hyundai Veloster was in this group as well. I mean, the Veloster just did a couple of corners caught up to these guys. The Odyssey was trying to look for a way past, there just wasn't the space there. In the end, the G-Wagon would have the acceleration to run to the finish line and keep hold of the position. The Odyssey have to settle for 11th with the Veloster in 12th. Yeah, I mean, G-Wagon got in my way a lot, but well done for keeping it there. The podium in Pega would take victory. Static Sheep in second with the BMW, and Kiak in third with that Maserati. I'm glad I finally got around to building the MG. I'm glad I finally used it. It's a hell of an overall C-Class car, that thing. It worked at all of the tracks. It wasn't quite so good at the Bugatti circuit, perhaps not quite having the acceleration of the ultimate fastest cars around there, but as a car that would work on just about any track, that MG is really rather good. That was really rather good. It was a match with just about everything in terms of lap time, at least at Laguna. It was a match with just about anything in terms of lap times at Road Atlanta as well. And I actually got a victory for the first time in a long time, because I didn't start from dead last again, which is always good. But yeah, I really like that car. And for those wondering, in case you haven't heard, the MG, it was a prize for a Rivals event on Forza a little while ago. I don't know whether it will come back around again at some point, but that is how some of us have got the MG, and you might not see it normally being buyable in the game. That, though, is going to be it for this week's Versus the Community. Now, next week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So, if you want to sign up and take part, it's going to be on Thursday, the 5th of July. We are going to go racing on Wreckfest. We're going to be playing on Wreckfest. We're going to be doing some multiplayer. We'll probably be doing some one-make races. There might be some lawnmower. There might be some harvester races and so on. We might run in some of the classes as well. We're just going to do some races, and I will probably pick the best ones to make kind of like a highlights video, and we'll probably make that into a video. I'm kind of looking forward to doing some more Wreckfest. It's really good fun. It's really good fun. And I've got, hopefully, a server working. It was working last time, so we'll be able to have our own server, being able to do our own things. So if you want to sign up and take part in that, then you can. There'll be a link to our forums in the description, in the FailRace versus the community section. That is where you can sign up, and all of the rules, etc. will be sorted in there. That, though, is going to be it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.